Alright, so this is gonna be my first ever story time. I hate to use that word because it feels kind of lame. On this channel, and this is the Brandon Harmonti channel, which is my second channel. This channel is basically for disposable stuff that I don't give a crap about, and like music and just rant videos that I don't have to put a lot of work into editing. My main channel is called 9 Part Harmony. You should go check it out. I put a lot of work into it. Right now I'm working on I'm trying to make like a film, a documentary film about people that are addicted to Benadryl, which is a big rising concern right now. I think the subreddit is growing by the thousands every month. So I'm making a big thing where I interview people. Anyways, that's pretty much unrelated to the video. I'm going to title this, I got arrested for driving drunk through a cornfield and had to do labor. I can't fit all that in the title, obviously. But let me just go ahead and start. I was about 17 years old. And mind you, my whole 20s, I was an addict. And around the age 17, I was just starting to graduate into worse stuff. Like I went from the weed to the booze to the Adderall. Adderall is pretty much like a middleman period between weed and heroin. So I was doing all that stuff, but I didn't drink that much. Weirdly enough, I could hold my liquor at a young age, because every time I would get drunk, I would pretend not to be drunk. It was like a fun little game I played. But I did not do that on this night. I drank a lot and I drank too fast. So I met this girl like senior year of high school. I think I had graduated during this time. And she moved to my house. She came to my house to hang out with my sister, to stay with us for like a couple weeks. And I remember hearing that was going to happen. And I was like, whoa. Because I was like, this girl is like a babe. So one night she just got home. I got home from work and she was at my house. And that night we made out, and she was my girlfriend for years after that. And our relationship was basically built off of, our first conversation was probably about drugs while smoking weed. So that's a recipe for disaster already. My uncle actually gave us a nickname during this time. He called us Sid and Nancy. I don't know if you know who that is. Sid Vicious and they were infamous toxic couple. Sid Vicious was in a punk band, and they kind of lived life like in excess in drugs, but they also fought constantly. I imagine Sid and Nancy were probably throwing beer bottles at each other's head, and it smashes on the wall behind them. Because me and this girl had a passionate but toxic relationship. We fought all the time, and she was super jealous. I don't know if all girls are like that, but if you've ever had a girlfriend that is kind of jealous all the time for no reason, and you don't really give them a reason to, you're like, you kind of go insane at some point. Because I remember there were times where we'd be driving in the car. She hogged the music, but it was my turn to play a CD, and I played like a Led Zeppelin CD. And some song came on, and we're just driving down the road, and she was listening to the lyrics, and she went, "Oh, I see. So you f***ed her, didn't you?" And I'm like, what the fuck? What? And she was cryptically listening to the lyrics, and she thought I put on a song, a Led Zeppelin song, by chance, and was like, yeah, listen to these lyrics. It's about some girl I f***ed. Like, and I'm trying to cryptically tell you through sound waves. That was a daily basis, basically. Fighting, punching each other, her just punching me in the face. I remember the feeling of getting punched in the face during an argument, and for me, it was a girl that did it, and Because I remember, this is what happens when you get punched in the face when you're arguing with your girlfriend. You're just talking, and then all of a sudden, your head bobs back, and you see white for a second. And then you get really fucking angry. So that's what would happen every week, pretty much. I don't remember what we were fighting about, but we got some neighborhood kid, 21-year-old, to buy liquor. Like, we kind of pretend to be his friend to get him to buy liquor. And when you're young, you don't get the 21-year-old on your street to buy a six-pack. You tell him to buy three half gallons so you have enough liquor for your 17-year-old self to last maybe months, even weeks. So I think I was drinking Zelko vodka, and we got into a fight, punching holes in the wall, passionate in a good way. Like, it was toxic, but it wasn't like a nightmare. Like, we loved each other. So I don't know what we were fighting about on this night, but I think I remember getting extremely drunk all of the sudden. And I was at the point where, so say you're drunk and you're listening to a whole CD and you're singing it, you're running around the room singing all the lyrics, and then the CD ends, but then starts over, but you don't realize it, so you think it's the first time you're hearing it. I remember listening to a CD and singing, and then I was naked, and I remember my girlfriend looked at me and went, "Babe, are you drunk? Like, what are you doing? Like, you're walking around naked." And I was like, "Oh, I guess so." But anyway, we fought, and I stumbled out of the house, and I had a piece of crap. What was it? Like a Windstar? An Escort, Ford Escort, like, wagon. But for some reason, I didn't take my car. I stumbled outside, and when you're drunk, pretty much anything you stumble into becomes whatever you're doing for the next 24 hours. Like, say you're at a casino and you're drunk, you run into somebody and start talking. They're your whole life because you get tunnel vision where you can only focus on one thing. So I guess I stumbled out of the house and I saw a spare car that we had. This is where it gets, like, I get really regretful because I really regret doing this. And I don't know if I already said it. This is a really irresponsible story. Don't do it. I could have died. I almost died. I could have died. And I don't advocate it at all. And I'm glad I survived it. Anyway, I see this spare car. It's a green Thunderbird. And I just, okay, get in the car, and the keys are in there. So once you're to the point where you're drunk, naked, and singing, you have no memory of the past 5 minutes or the future 10 minutes. So all of a sudden, I'm driving on these back roads like Clockwork Orange. Just driving. And I don't know if I had any direction where I was going. But I do remember I was texting every drug contact I had to see if they had anything. Like annoying people. Like, probably nobody had anything. But maybe I was trying to do that. Because that was something I did. And still kind of did in recent memory. Get really drunk and then get a drug. Get Adderall. So I'm driving on these back roads. And all of a sudden, I see a bunch of deer. Or no, I think I saw one deer. And I slammed on the brakes. But there's an old saying, if you live in the country, like, if you see one deer, there's probably like 7. And there were. Like, all these deer kind of came out of nowhere once I slammed on the brakes. And I looked at this deer, and he's just looking at me. And I start honking the horn, like, "Get out of the way!" And the deer started to, like, lightly run into a field. And by the way, it wasn't a cornfield. It was a soy field. But people don't know what a soy field is. So I always just say, I drove drunk through a cornfield. That would be hard to do if you did that. But for some reason, I saw this deer running, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and veer off the road and chase the deer. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea. I wasn't going to hit the deer. But during this time, like, I had a best friend. And we kind of, like, worked off of each other and always were pitching ideas. Like, oh, let's start this band. Or, I had this idea for a film, and he was in his crazy phase. I called it a Jim Morrison phase, where we would get drunk and he would drive his car and he would just veer off and start driving in fields, and we thought that was like badass. Like, yeah, no such thing as rules. So that's, I guess, why I did it. I like, oh, crazy, I'm gonna chase a deer. And I just remember it was almost like a hypnotic, beautiful scene. Like we're in the pitch black of a cornfield on some back road, and I'm following this deer, probably going 30 miles per hour. I don't know how fast deer run, but I was going fast, and they were all forming. It was kind of like that V scene from Lord of the Rings where the Nazguls are chasing Frodo or whatever, and they form a V. But it was my car, and they were forming an outward V. And I remember the deer was probably like running and thinking like, this is highly unusual. Like, for a deer are used to two things, like people slamming on their brakes and yelling at them, or stopping and looking at them and gazing at the deer. The deer was probably like, this has never happened to me before. This is fucking, and I'm chasing them, and all of a sudden, I guess I get sick of chasing deer, destroying property that I didn't know. I didn't know it was like farmers' livestock plant stuff. Like, in my mind, it was just like green shit. Like, who cares what this is? I'm running over it though, swerving, driving. Anyway, I got bored of chasing the deer, I guess, because my memory is really fuzzy at this point. And eventually I said, all right, I got to get back on the road. So I'm driving, and I'm not looking where I'm going. And I finally say, okay, there's the road. But it was like a hill that slanted down into a ditch and then back up to the road. And I remember, boom, I slammed the car down. And to me, everything was fine. I was like, there's no way I did damage to the car, because when you're 17, you don't know anything about cars or how sturdy they are or what they can manage or withhold. So oh man, I probably would have broke my neck if I wasn't drunk, because I guess I was super relaxed. And then I drove off like it never happened. And I guess when you commit crimes like that when you're young, you never think it's gonna come back and bite you in the ass. Like, how can they prove it? How can they prove my car drove through this cornfield because I wanted to chase a deer for some reason? So I start driving down the road, and eventually the car's engine starts, I think, overheating. I start seeing smoke and smelling this thick, foul smoke. And I started panicking because the car was like breaking down. And I'm super drunk. I don't know where to park it. And at this time in my life, I was super conscious of getting arrested or cops or having alcohol on your breath, because I had already had like 6 cop experiences in my 1 year of driving. Not because I'm a cool, badass criminal, but because cops do that. They pull over young people. They yank them out of their car with no probable cause. That's what cops do. They get the canine every time. So this car keeps breaking down, and then I stop and I panic, and then it would ride for a little bit and then break down. So I was driving down the road, and I just kept breaking down. I think I was crying at this point. And every time I would see headlights, I would pull over and then go run into the woods. So I had to do that like 40 times. I eventually realized I'm not going to make it home. So I kind of parked the car maybe a mile up from my house. So eventually I stumbled all the way home. And I remember walking through the front door, coming in and going downstairs to my little room that I shared with my Sid and Nancy styled girlfriend. And I walked into the room and I started crying really hard. And mind you, we're still in a fight. We were like screaming at each other, and I stumbled out. So she's still angry. But she took like one look at me, because I don't cry a lot. I don't think she'd ever seen me cry, even drunk. And she immediately went from mad from looking at me walking in to extremely concerned and, oh baby, what's the matter? What happened? What happened? What did you do? I'm chasing these deer and the fucking. I couldn't even like explain what happened, and I kept saying I f***ed the car up. The car is f***ed up, and I don't know what I did to it. And she's like kind of like coddling me like a baby, and eventually she went up and got a plate of food of whatever dinner there was that night. I remember specifically it was meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, something like that. She brought it down, and I proceeded to eat it like a dog. I I don't know why. But I guess I didn't have a fork or something. But I went from crying to like acting like a belligerent drunk idiot on the bed on my hands and knees, eating like a dog, like because when you're drunk, you get super hungry and yeah, that's what people pretty much do. And then I passed out. So the next day, I wake up, and I think the day went as normal. I was probably hungover. I think I went to work. Oh no, this is what happened. So I told my dad, I said, Dad, I was driving the Thunderbird last night. For some reason, engine started smoking. It broke down up the street. I said, oh, man, let's go. And we drove up to it, and I was like, man, this is parked like right on a main street. Like, I started kind of worrying about that. I'm like, and he like turns on the car and said, dude, the engine's fried. It's fucked. Let's just leave it here. Like, had he towed it, I would have been fine. Maybe. Nah, I don't think so. So I said, all right, man, let's just go home. I guess that's it. We got some good use out of that car. And I think the car had damage to it. Like, it probably cost $2,000 to fix. But still doesn't matter. I still feel really guilty about this to this day. Because my brother used that car. Like, my older brother. Like, that was his car. And then now he was stuck. Like, he didn't have a car, so he had to borrow my mom's. It worked out in the end. He could pretty much drive whenever he wanted. But I remember we got home, and I overheard my brother go, what happened to the car? And my dad said, oh, man, you didn't change the oil. He said that to my brother. And he went, oh, man, okay. So I was like, oh, okay. Clears me of all responsibility. I honestly, at that age, I don't think I gave it that I drove through a cornfield and chased a deer, that I was drunk. I didn't care that me and my girlfriend fought all the time. I didn't care about anything, really. So the day went pretty much normal. Went to work, went home, and the night after, me and my girlfriend were into doing something called triple C's at this time. I would never recommend doing these. Actually, to this day, if I see the triple C box, I immediately want to throw up, because I think it caused so much liver and kidney damage, and it was a horrible trip. Like, it was basically Robitussin, but with this weird added chemical that made you hear buzzing in your ears. I just remember everybody's face on triple C's was like they had the Adam Lanza face the whole time. It wasn't enjoyable, but you would trip and you would closed eye visuals, stuff like that. And we tripped, then went to sleep, and I woke up with the worst triple C hangover ever. Like, you feel depleted, dehydrated, sick. You can hear buzzing in your ears. You're numb, and you feel disgusting. And I woke up to my dad knocking at my door the night after the triple C trip. And I woke up and said, oh, what's up? Because I wasn't used to somebody knocking at my door or waking me up. I said, Brandon. I said, yeah, well, come out here, man. Come on. And I get up. And there's like a little crack in my door, and my dad's standing there. I saw a cop. And I remember thinking, why does this cop look like a super soldier? Like he was decked out with vest, guns. You could hear beeping. You could hear the cop beeping sounds. He was a bald guy, and I said, I don't even think I knew. I don't even think it registered in my mind. And I walked out, and he said, let's step outside. Me and my dad and this cop go out on the front porch. The cop says, are you Brandon Harmonti? I said, yes. And he said, did you drive a Thunderbird on 6/19/2010, whatever it was? And I didn't know if I answered, but I think I looked at my dad and he went, yeah, tell him. And I said, yeah. And he went, okay, well, you're formally under arrest at this point, because we found out what you did. We know that you drove through the cornfield, and I was trying to register all this with my terrible triple C hangover. But after he arrested me, I thought he was going to cuff me. But he looked at my dad and went, okay, man, well, it's in your name, and sorry for harassing you about it. I didn't know it was your son. So what he did was the cop, while I was sleeping, the cop came to my house and was about to arrest my dad because the car was under his name. But I think it registered immediately because driving through a cornfield is a very juvenile thing to do. And I remember the cop wasn't a dick about it. He kind of seemed like overwhelmed with it, like he didn't want to deal with it. I don't think he even wanted to arrest me. But he started explaining how he busted me, how he found out it was me. Of course, I was very interested. How? How do you know? Well, apparently, while I drove off of the little cliff and landed on the road, the oil pan fell onto the road, and I left tire marks. But the oil pan had a little bit of green paint on it because whoever painted the car did a half-ass job. So this cop took on this case like he was like McGruff the crime dog. I don't even know what reference to make. Kojak, whatever. He took it on like it was a personal responsibility for him to bust this kid, me. And he was explaining it, and he said, so first I saw the green paint, and I went to, he like spent a whole day going to like the MVA and then to every dealership in the town to see who sold a Thunderbird. Eventually found out it was me. And he explained it to me, and I knew at this time not to say much, like, oh, I'm not gonna. But he did say, he said, dude, I just talked, he didn't say dude, but he was like, I just talked to the farmer, and we just wanted, why did you do it? Like, do you have a personal vendetta against this guy? And I remember I went, I said, I was chasing a deer. And that was the worst thing I could have said. Like, well, maybe it wasn't the worst. Maybe it was good that I said that. Maybe he was like, what? I guess it was good that I wasn't destroying the property of a farmer on purpose. But he said, you know how much soy? It was a soy field. He said, you know how much damage you caused? And I'm like, what? And he said, $2,000 of soy that I drove over. And he said, here's the deal, bud. I talked to the farmer, and he understands. He was young once. This sort of thing happens. He's not mad. He just wants to know who did it. And he offered for you to come by and talk to him personally. And it's up to him whether or not you get charged. Well, he said you're getting charged either way. But it's up to him whether this case will get dismissed, thrown out. Because he was like, believe me, this farmer is a decent guy. And what a decent thing to do. So I looked at my dad, and he nodded and said, go do it. And he said, okay. I said, okay, I'll go do it. He said, by the way, he knows you. I said, what? He said, yeah, he was your basketball coach when you were an elementary school kid. I said, oh, shit. Oh, okay. It's Farmer Dave. I knew it. I knew his name. This kid that was in my grade, it was his father who taught us basketball and was a farmer. We used to when we were little tiny elementary kids, we'd go to the farm, the pumpkin patch. The guy would be there giving us a tour. So I said, okay, I remember him being nice, so maybe this won't be that bad. And so I said, okay, I'll go do it. The cop left. Well, by the way, when you get arrested when you're a minor, at least where I am, the state of Maryland, you, I don't think you get cuffed. They just give you a paper. I don't know if they're allowed to cuff you, because I'd already got arrested twice at that point in my 1 year of driving. And so I already knew how the system worked. What you pretty much had to do, you got arrested, and I don't even know if you went to court. You went to see this lady, like a social worker. It was kind of like seeing the principal. You go in and sit down. Hey, what's going on? It's like being on probation. Like, what's going on in your head? Are you sober? Are you going to go to rehab? They always push rehab every time you get arrested for anything like this. So I was like, this is bad, because my first two arrests were already still pending cases. Now, on top of that, I got a third. I'm like, I'm screwed. And I'm about to be an adult, so they'll probably charge me as an adult. So I remember stumbling downstairs. I told my girlfriend, I said, I gotta go see this farmer guy. So I drove up, I pulled in, and I was like, man, this is so nostalgic, because I remember going there as a kid on elementary school field trips. I drove up and I knocked on the door, and I remember thinking, this is a very adult thing I had to do. Like, I was unprepared, didn't know how to act, but I remember thinking that as I knocked at the door, like, I have to apologize like a man. That's what I was thinking. He opened the door, and he looked like the most pleasant farmer guy with a tan. He looked like he should have been on like a butter packet. Like, perfect farmer, perfect family. And he greeted me like as warm as Santa Claus. Brandon, how are you? I haven't seen you in years. You still playing basketball? And I was like, oh, no, not really. And he said, come sit down in the office. He had an office. Like, farmers have offices. It was like in a barn, I think. So I sat down. He sat across me at a desk. And he said, so what happened, man? And I told him, I said, I don't think I told him that I chased a deer. No, I did, because he made a joke about it. I said, I was drunk. I was fighting with my girlfriend. I don't know why I did it. I didn't know why I did it. And he said, so you were drunk? You chased a deer. And he made a joke like, well, good luck. Good. I'm glad that deer was fast or something. And he said, listen, man. He said, people think farmers make a lot of money because they probably sell their whole crop for thousands of dollars. But he said, farmers are basically just like anybody that works. You live paycheck to paycheck. A $2,000 damaged soy could sink his farm. And he's like, it was bad economy. It was like 2009 or something. And I felt so freaking guilty. And he said, well, listen, man. He said, how about you come work for me for a little bit? And when it comes time for your court case, I'll represent you. And I'll tell him you're a good kid, because I can tell you're a good kid. And I remember, like, saying, thank you so much. Yes, when do you want me to start? He said, come in tomorrow, 9 in the morning. So I said, all right. So I drove home, told my girlfriend, and I remember at this time I was super paranoid about my job, finding out about any crime I committed or if I smoked weed or drank. Because the economy, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, or you are, the economy was so bad in 2009 that I was lucky. I got a job at a nursing home where I made $10 an hour compared to $7.25 if you worked at Taco Bell. And I remember friends of mine were envious of me. And during this time, I remember if you wanted to hang out with somebody that lived far or go to a concert, the economy was so bad and people were so broke that a big excuse back then was, I can't afford the gas, which is funny enough happening again today, which is probably going to get worse, by the way. So So I didn't want my job to find out, so I don't think I told anybody. I told a couple trusted coworkers. Actually, I think I might have bragged about it to a couple people, like, oh, look how crazy I am. I drove through a cornfield and got arrested for the third time at age 17. It's weird the stuff that you think is cool at age 17 and 16. So I finished work that day, went to bed sober, woke up the next day, went to the farm at 9 in the morning. I remember pulling up and there was like 9 dudes working there and they were all kind of looking at me. And in my head, I'm like, these guys are going to hate me. I thought the farmer was going to hate me. He didn't hate me. I thought these guys are probably like, he's taking food out of my mouth somehow. Pulled up and I got out of the car and everybody greeted me like so warmly. Hey, are you the kid that drove drunk? And oh, I remember doing that at your age. Driving drunk, racing. And all these farmer people accepted me like I was like their son or something. And I didn't know what work I was going to be doing. Like, I was 17. You think you're invincible? You think you can work all day in hot weather? Oh, sure, I'll do that. I said, what are we going to do today? They said, we're going to bale hay. Have you ever baled hay before? I said, no. And they started laughing. Like, oh, man, you're in for it now. And I was like, no way. But I think I still had the Triple C hangover. So I wasn't. No, actually, you know what? I did it 2 nights in a row, so I was hungover again from Triple C's. So we walk into the barn, and mind you, it's probably 100-degree weather, because it's like June. And when you walk into a barn that's like padded with walls and hay, it's all of a sudden like 20 degrees hotter. And I remember thinking, this is like dangerous. This feels dangerous to work in this type of heat. Like, I remember my heart was like, boom, 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 boom. And there was this big, it was like a escalator thing, but it was a conveyor belt. Like, they had this huge machine. It might have been attached to a truck or something. And there was so the barn had like, you know, like a loft. A big floor thing with hay. And we had to get it down on the conveyor belt. So it was a simple process of one person picks up the bale of hay, which is like 70 pounds, hands it to the next guy that puts it on the it's like a big process that involves like 8 people. So I had to climb up this ladder, and mind you, heat rises. So I'm at the top of a hot barn during 100-degree weather, and I had just tripped on over-the-counter medication the night before. So I start learning what it is to bale hay and to manage hay. So I had to lift, hand it to the guy, then again, and again. And I remember by like the 7th or 8th bale of hay, my heart was pounding and I was covered in sweat, dehydrated already. And by the 9th, I said, oh, I gotta stop the machine for a second. And I walked up and I started vomiting pink pill vomit from the pills from the night before. And everybody's laughing because I guess they'd been through the same experience. You get used to it, I guess, as a farmer. And I think I tried to do it for a little bit longer. And it was one of those situations where it feels like 10 minutes. It felt like a minute, but it was like 15 just to get 15 bales of hay on this conveyor belt. And every time I would do 5 and then I'd throw up. Finally, they took me off of that and put me in a better position where there wasn't as much heat. Maybe, I don't know. I don't remember what happened. Like, my memory's fuzzy, obviously. I was like 17 when this happened. And once that part was done, like once we got the hay onto the truck, it became easier as the day went on. We started doing more simple tasks. They all involved hay somehow. But I remember what this old farmer guy was like 79 years old baling this hay and stuff. And I remember you would see this guy on the country back roads driving a big ass tractor, and he looked kind of scary. Like he had weird teeth and weird skin. Like he'd worked so long on a farm that he started to look like a Halloween mask or something. And there was another guy that was like real chipper and nice and was talking about starting his own hay business. One of the most fascinating parts of this story is I got to learn like the life and the mindset of a farmer, and pretty much all they talked about was hay. Like it was the most fascinating thing to them. And when we would drive this hay around, they they would look at every farm and talk about what type of hay they had, how much they were going for a bale of hay, $9, $11, talking about the economy affecting the hay business. And I remember thinking like, oh, I've driven on these streets hundreds of times and never even thought about it. But all of a sudden these farmers are talking about they knew everybody. So in my head I was like, this is definitely going to spread around to like everyone in my town maybe. I was paranoid about that. But the farmer took us out to Roy Rogers to eat. He paid for all of us. And it felt like I was like one of the crew. I worked for a couple days. And I think if you add up how much money I was supposed, if I was getting paid, how much money I would have made during the few days I worked, it probably would have been like $400. But for some reason, the farmer called me on the 5th day. He said, "All right, Brandon, that's all for now. We gotta wait a couple months later. We gotta wait a couple weeks to deal with all this." And I said, "All right, man. Well, just call me anytime." And he said, "Don't worry about it." He said, I'll come to your court date and I'll settle this." And he knew he had the power. I'm pretty sure he had the power to completely get rid of the charge. So I remember thanking him and saying, "Hey man, call me anytime you need me. I'll come and work. I'll overwork for what I did." Because I felt so freaking bad about it. So yep, that's the story isn't completely finished, but that's pretty much the story. Driving through a cornfield drunk, getting arrested, having to work at a farm to work it off, meeting all these cool farmers, learning how the farmer life is. By the way, farmer life is awesome. Like, I would love to do that, especially now with all the technology and stuff. It was such a simplistic lifestyle where everybody knew everybody. It was friendly, redneck jokes, spit chewing tobacco. So fast forward a couple months, because I got to get this part done, is finally have to see this lady, this like social worker lady that determined if I went to juvenile jail. I don't think I was bad enough to be thrown in jail, but I had 3 charges in a year, mainly because cops. That's how cops were. Every time you get pulled over, I got pulled over constantly. I remember being 17 or 18 and being like, this is like the 7th time I've had German Shepherds on my car for getting pulled over for a busted light. Like, that's how it is. A lot of people I know don't know that. Like, they would call me paranoid for years after that. Like, if somebody had weed, I'd be like, get that out of the car. You're not going to drive in my car with weed. And people would call me like a paranoid bring down. But I was like, you haven't experienced what I've experienced. Like, it felt like I was like harassment by the cops at that point. Because getting pulled over for a headlight and blah, 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 having to see a social worker lady. Fast forward a couple months, I go and see her, and I remember she was saying, this is like a number of felonies, like, that will stick with you for the rest of your life. I didn't know what to say to her, and I said, "Oh, well," she didn't know I'd worked with the farmer, and she was basically saying, "You're probably going to do time for this. You're probably going to do about a year." And I said, "Well, don't you know about, like, the farmer?" And she was like, "No." And I said, "Well, I worked for the farmer. I, like, worked off the money." She was like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I thought you would know about that. Like, the cop didn't put that in his report?" And she was like, "No." And I said, "Well, I have his number. Can you call him?" And she immediately thought that I was, like, conning her, like I had a guy pretending to be a farmer, because she wouldn't take my cell phone number. She had to go onto Google and find this guy's farm. And she called him up on speakerphone because she didn't believe me. She was like, "That, no way, you farmer." So she called him up and he picked up. Hello? Hi, Farmer Dave, is this you? And I'm sitting there just like, here's my fate. The fate of my next years on this guy. He said, I'm here with Brandon Harmonti, and he's telling me that he worked for you after destroying $2,000 of some aspect of your cornfield. Yeah, yeah, he worked for me. He's a good kid. He said I was young once. I remember driving drunk when I shouldn't have, and he's a good kid, and I don't think he should be charged with this at all. He worked all the money off. Like, he even lied for me, because I didn't work $2,000 of money. And I remember her going, okay, wow, cool. She hung up the phone and said, all right. She said, good work. Like, I'm dropping the charge. It's off your record, nothing. And I was like, yes. But I mentioned karma at the beginning of this video. Destroying this car, like, screwed me for the next 10 years. Because every time I would get a car, I've always, literally one of my number one fears in life is not having a car. Because you're stuck at your house, surrounded by cornfields. You can't even walk to a job. And my cars were always crapping out and breaking down. You'd go to the mechanic and it'd be like $1,100 to fix. And at that age, I'm like, dude, one, all my money is going to drugs. Two, like, seriously, cut me a break. Like, it was a constant thing of cars breaking down. I don't know if it was real karma, but every time I had car problems, I would think about this. And of course, my older brother went on for the next year thinking that he was responsible because he didn't change the oil. He didn't know I drove it through a cornfield. So one night, he went to a family reunion with my parents, like an hour up the road. And I have this notorious drunk uncle he's really funny, charming, charismatic dude. He would get drunk and he'd start insulting people. Like, if somebody in the family was overweight, he was like a roast comedian. Like, he was cutting. He would make fun of you for being fat or being bald, whatever your biggest fear was. He's a loudmouth. So my brother's drinking with my parents are there, my whole family, every distant relative, and my uncle made a joke about the car. He said, "How's the car? How's the car? Sean, how like my brother Sean? How's the car? Does it got any corn stuck up in the engine still?" And my brother went, "What?" And I wasn't there. My dad explained how this happened, and my dad went, "Oh." And my brother said, "What's going on here? Like, what is he talking about?" And they told him, they're like, "Brandon drove your car drunk and through a cornfield. He was chasing a deer." My brother flipped. He didn't drink anymore that night. He didn't talk to anybody. He sat in the car for like 7 hours waiting to get home. And of course, it's completely off my mind. I'm cured of my sins completely. I think I'm driving home with my girlfriend one night, and I remember I opened the door and walked in, and my brother's standing there like this. And he goes, "You drove through a cornfield?" And I looked at him, and I didn't even have an answer. I didn't even say anything. I went, "What?" And he just kept repeating it. "You drove through a cornfield with my car?" And he was pushing me. Like, I remember, like, my body was hitting the wall, and I just kept backing up. For some reason, anytime I get into a situation like that, like a fight or something, my mind goes completely calm, like my brain shuts down. And I just looked at him like I was sorry. I didn't know what to say. He's pushing me. He's trying to get me to punch him, to fight. I didn't want to fight him because I'm responsible for his car, the car he used. And he was yelling, "You're addicted to painkillers. You're addicted to painkillers." And my whole my mom, dad, my girlfriend, my sister are all coming out of their rooms. My brother's screaming at me, telling me, and he went, I went through your room. I found evidence that you're addicted to painkillers." I wasn't addicted to painkillers. I was years later, But at this time I wasn't, so I was like, what the hell did he find? I think he found there's like a little car part that has little holes in it that people would grind pills up. I think he found that in my room. Weird backstory. I don't want to make this video too much longer. Should I tell this part? Nah, I'm not going to tell that part. It's something to do with painkillers. Maybe I'll save that for another video. So he pretty much pushed me onto the ground and wanted to beat me up, but I wasn't fighting back. I wasn't arguing. Because every time I would say something like, yeah, what? He would get angrier, and I'm like, all right, I got to diffuse this situation. So overall, my lesson in this story is when you're drinking, don't drive, and if you drive, don't chase a deer. Leave the deer alone. Don't be a young idiot who physically fights with his girlfriend and stumbles out drunk. And I think, in the end, my brother won because he was sober and he's way successful than me. And I'm still almost in active addiction a lot of the times. And I'm pretty much kind of like stuck in arrested development. Like, I can't succeed and stuff. So he won in the long term. And years later, he bought me a car when I didn't have one. And I was like, man, what is it? What kind of karma is this? And for years, I've texted him drunk, like, long text of apologies about that incident. And it's to the point he doesn't even text back, because I'll do it every, 9 months or so. So that's the story. That's the video. That's my first story. I have, hundreds more. If you like this video, subscribe, check the description for links to my other channels, my music. I have a podcast. I'm going to upload a bunch of stuff on this channel, mostly stories and rants and reactions, stuff like that. Anyways, have a good day.